Does the thing speak to tell you it's being recorded? Does it do
It
that?
should do that.
Yeah. So then that's kind of your cue to start in a way. So
Yes.
I've got to consent to it being live streamed.
So we look as though we're live on YouTube, which is very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So hello from Anne Goodwin and Fiona Linday. We're very excited and pleased to be invited by the Midway Word to this festival. Hello from Anne Goodwin and Fiona Linday.
Oh yeah, I better say hello. Hello yes. From Anne Goodwin, hey.
She's here live in a spotty dress, like in the book.
Yay, yeah.
Yes, we're very grateful to Marilyn and all the people that in Christie as well for putting on this book festival for us. And I've certainly enjoyed popping into some of the meetings, and I'm glad that we have some people listening in to us live. There's going to be some opportunities for questions at the end, but Anne and I are just going to talk today about our books and our writing, and I hope you are in a nice cool place with a nice glass of water yourselves to stay cool on this beautiful day. So my name is Fiona and my background is working in education, and I've supported learning in schools for quite a few years. And then from that came some young adult writing. I wrote Get Over It, a book after volunteering at a day hospice as well. And that was about a young adult losing his mum. And then I got a bit more cheerier. I wrote some short stories, and I've brought a compilation out this year of a collection of my poetry and short stories. Brought it all together, called Count Our Blessings, that is, with onwards and upwards. And I've done some editing of other people's work as well, some previously marginalised folk from Leicester who meet at the Attenborough Arts Centre, which is an amazing, inclusive place. And that's a bit about me. I've been dabbling with writing a bit of picture books lately because I'm reading a lot of picture books, because all of a sudden I've got 4 under 5 grandchildren who I see quite regularly. So, but as I was saying, I do also read adult material occasionally, and this is where I first came across Anne's stories, and this one is called Becoming Someone. Anne and I read together, didn't we, Anne, at workshop quite a few years ago.
2015 it was.
You reminded me.
Well, I just know because it was when my first novel had just come out, so it was like kind of, that was a landmark for me.
And that was, your first novel was Sugar and Snails, I believe. That's what you read at Workshop Library. That's the one, yes. And I can remember at the time feeling emotional hearing you read that. It was something written from the heart, I believe. And I very much enjoyed that. We were a mixed bunch on that day. There was a poet there as well. And I was reading from my young adult novel, but I just connected with how honest and realistic your characters were. But I understand that novel, that first novel, was put forward for a prize.
Yes, it was shortlisted for the Polari First Book Prize, which was a great honour. So it was the following year, but yeah, that was very exciting too.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you came into writing once you'd given up your kind of career, is that right? Sort
of. I've actually written all my life from when I was quite young. Was very nervous about sharing it with people, apart from my little sister, who was sort of the writing was forced on her, but she was a very good listener, and still is a support to me. But yes, I mean, in my career as a clinical psychologist, I tended to focus on other people's stories. That, you know, part of my work was helping them to talk about the things that had happened to them, which maybe were quite difficult to share. But yes, I sort of dipped in and out of writing, and then sort of like had my little midlife crisis, like you do, and decided I needed to take a little bit more space for myself, and took some time to write. So I was writing short stories, having a bash at novels, which were dreadful, or I would start things, you know, with lots of enthusiasm, think, oh, this is a great idea, and then it would peter out, because I didn't really know how you were supposed to do it, and I thought it would be much easier than it was. But by the time, so I had been writing, and I was still working when I started Sugar and Snails again. But by the time it was published, because it took me 7 years from getting the idea to being published by small independent press Inspired Quill, by that time I'd actually taken early retirement and was able to write full time, which is quite a luxury and quite good, because I'm quite a slow writer, and I actually use voice activated software. I can type. I'm actually quite a good typist, but I had repetitive strain injury, which developed from writing theses rather than things for work, rather than for my fiction. So I rely on that now, which actually slows the writing down. But hey, you know, it's great. It's great to be doing it. So now I've published 3 novels and a short story collection that you mentioned, with Inspired Quill.
Yes, and they have been a great publishing house for you, Inspired Quill, I do believe. I pitched them and didn't get in, so well done on your perseverance. But I must say, when I brought my collection together, I was looking at your collection and thinking, well, yours hasn't got poetry in like mine, but this I've used in some of my workshops, actually. There's lots of lovely stories of all sizes and shapes and to fit everybody, but there was one called Fat Feet that really I connected with, because you read it once, short story, and you think it's a nice story about a couple and their journey, kind of thing, their relationship. And then when you think about it a little bit more, she challenges you, Dazan, with it. It's actually about carbon footprint. Their Fat Feet is about their carbon footprint, and it's I'm bringing together an anthology. A couple of years ago with learners at the Attenborough, I brought together Family Matters, edited that, thanks to some very generous support from the Arts Council and help from Dahlia Publishing and Attenborough Arts and Renaissance One, some wonderful people out there who helped me again through the process. And it's difficult, isn't it, to get the courage sometimes to bring a book together. But as I say, my present book is Making Our World Better, and I'm doing some workshops towards that. And so I use Fat Feet, your short story, for the learners to emulate kind of talking to people on 2 levels. Like, you tell a story, but then there's an underlying kind of theme. And yours was about watching your kind of a green theme, wasn't it, Anne? I think about thinking about what your carbon footprint is. And as I say, that was great to read to inclusive learners at the Attenborough, and for them to realise that clever things could be done with short stories. And also, you know, when we're thinking about improving our own kind of behaviour and attitudes and challenging our own kind of stereotypical thinking, and try not to stigmatise kind of people. It's all right saying this is what you should be doing, but really the author needs to be kind of reflecting back and thinking, well, what are you doing in your own life? And that's what happens with me when I write, that I often kind of, there's more than a hint of truth in it. And I think that comes from maybe my life experience of a long time in schools and now in lifelong learning. And I'm sure that's the same with you, Anne, isn't it, with your vast experience of work?
Yes, I mean, I'm interested in, as I think like you are, in sort of empowerment issues. So my themes that, and it takes, I think it takes quite a while to actually work out what it is that you write about, and which is kind of strange, but it sometimes it's like the underlying message, as you're saying in that story. So my themes are identity, which so in my first novel particularly, was about a woman with a marginalised identity, and my next novel, most recent novel, is about a woman with who's given an identity as a psychiatric patient, which is very different. So yeah, one of my themes is identity. Also, mental health is a big one for me. Each of my novels includes an element of writing about mental health issues, because that is my clinical, my professional background, but also, you know, I've gone into that profession because it speaks to me personally as well. Yeah. And my third theme is about social justice. So so those questions about, well, whose voice can be heard, particularly again in my most recent novel, Matilda Windsor is Coming Home. I wanted to give a voice to people who'd been voiceless and shut away and kind of shut up verbally, as well as shut up in these large asylums. So that novel is set in the late 1980s, early 1990s, at a time when the long stay hospitals were starting to close down, which and it's based on my experience of working there. But you know, those people whose lives were wasted, dismissed, you know, that made, treated as if they weren't important, which is still there to a degree, but yeah, I think our attitudes to mental health are a lot more positive than they used to be. Yeah. So yeah, I think we do have an overlap, you and I, Fiona, in our interests of how we're building on our previous careers, and also kind of what we want people to take from our writing. And for me, I mean, I think as a fiction writer, my main job is to entertain, and I think a story is spoiled if it carries too much of a message, too much weight. And I really like, most of all, is when people get different things from it, you know, and they say, oh, you put that in. I thought, oh, did I? I didn't know that. Or people are, I mean, it's quite nice with Matilda Windsor is Coming Home, having recently been published, so I'm, you know, getting the reviews at the moment. And I think most readers warm to the main character, Matty, who is yeah, she's a lot unto herself. I loved writing her. I mean, and her story is very tragic, but she's really upbeat. So most people like her, but their opinions about the other characters, and there are two other main characters, can differ so much, which is really, it is nice, because it's then the book has a life of its own, really. But I mean, I was wondering, Fiona, if you want to sort of summarize what you want people to get from your writing.
Yeah, I suppose I've done some family history, and I've done some fiction, non-writing, non-fiction writing, yeah, non-writing, that's very good, about my experiences of losing a baby, and I left that 20 years before I, could write that, and that went in here in a title called Love. It was a short story. A competition. I won a competition that asked for stories about love, and I just thought, I'm going to write about losing this baby, and that was a shock to me that I won, but it showed that kind of, in using my authentic voice and really wearing my heart on my sleeve, people have been interested and engaged. And so that was encouraging. As I say, the young adult novel first came to me through experience. And I've been supporting young people in various settings, but I went to work in a loss and bereavement place for young people, because I got a tie with a local hospice, and I thought, I met some of the guests, and I thought, oh, what happens to your children, and that got me thinking. So I went and helped on a camp that dealt with this, and we did wonderful things to help these young people process what had happened and be all right with, angry feelings and all things like that. So yeah, from that I wrote for a really difficult to reach audience, which young adult young men, because I knew that was where maybe they didn't talk as much as the girls about. And it's interesting, this centre that I volunteered at, they considered loss as, parents divorcing or parents splitting up. Not always is it bereavement that is the loss. So yeah, I think I've kind of wanted to share my knowledge or ideas about issues that have previously maybe been pushed under the carpet, like yourself, Anne, that, where there's been a bit of stigma or something. And also in my workshops with learners at the Attenborough, I want to open up kind of submission opportunities and publication opportunities to those people who think they've got a tiny voice that doesn't matter. And that can be people with health issues or any marginalised people. So working from Leicester, very diverse, so that's a great start. But so thank you for that. Yeah, so I'm trying to get across really that, like yourself, that all voices matter, and that I've learned so much from listening to young people and working with people in mental health settings who use writing and certain spoken word to get over some of their everyday challenges. And I very much admire folk who, I can remember working with people with physical disabilities and I used to say things like, you can do this, as they went to do their physio that seemed very mundane and all this. And years later, as things come back to bite you on the bum, I've now got osteoarthritis, and I'm thinking, oh, did I used to say that? This is more difficult, practicing what you preach. So yeah, I think life has a way of kind of teaching you things along the way, and certainly listening to kind of people who have come alongside, I've I've learned some great things, and it's great if we can pass those on. And through writing a story that is partly true. I can remember I wrote a story about set in Eastern Europe about a young girl that was taken into a posh hotel, stripped naked by these two leather-clad guys, and had photos taken of her. And somebody said, "Oh, you've got such a good imagination to think of a beginning like that." I said, "No, it happened in a hotel in Bulgaria. You know, we were there, and it happened." Unfortunately, my son was disappointed that it didn't happen while he was there. But I wasn't. I was very cross, you know. And I think we respond to what makes us cross, don't we? Sometimes that we want to kind of unveil kind of where there are things happening that are very shocking. And I know when I read this book of yours, I had to kind of go back and reread a part where within normal life at this psychiatric hospital, this poor girl, when she went to pay for get some money for sweets, was taken into a closet and abused. And I just thought, well, that it had been really gently dealt with by Anne, and very because to avoid triggers for those who that would have set off enormous alarms. But it happened, and you know, she didn't push that under the carpet. You brought it to our attention, and I think that is kind of quite a privilege to be able to do, isn't it, Anne?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a world that, I mean, what that scene was probably not nearly as bad as a lot of things that happen to people in those hospitals. So I didn't want to avoid that, but I didn't want to, I mean, I didn't want it to be sensationalized and exaggerated so that people could, I mean, I think some people read that and weren't sure what they'd read actually, and maybe that's what you're saying, having to go back, oh yeah, is that really it? But yeah, people, I mean, people had prostituted themselves for cigarettes in that place, and quite a lot of abuse going on.
And I think this is where your art is shown, in that you kind of are telling this really serious, you're unveiling of serious issues, things like this. But then there's the humor and the gentleness, and there's you inspire us by showing us characters that live in another world, a fantasy world maybe, and that seems very happy. Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I wanted to do with that novel, with the character of Mattie in Matilda Windsor is Coming Home, I wanted her to be clearly somebody with what anyone would recognise as a major psychiatric issue, that she doesn't, you know, should stand out on the street. I wanted her to be kind of obviously mentally ill, if that's the terminology. But I wanted her to be good company for the reader. I didn't want her to be too miserable. So the way that I discovered that I could do that was to give her what would be called grandiose delusions. So she lives, and if people remember those big psychiatric hospitals, some of the buildings are still there, and some have been demolished and some have been converted into luxury apartments. But they're big, grand buildings. So Mattie, in her mind, it was her family's country house, and that the staff and nurses who work there are the servants, and the psychiatrist coming to interview her, a journalist, and she's a society hostess. So she it's quite fun getting into her mindset. But she's, I think, I mean, I don't know what you thought, Fiona, but to me, it's a necessary delusion, because that's how she's coped with the terrible things that have happened to her. And I kind of quite, I mean, I know I made her up, but I quite admire how she's been able to do that, how she's managed to make something positive out of a terrible situation. And that's taken time. She's been in this hospital for 50 years. But I also didn't want the humor, you know, when we're talking about the humor, I didn't want it to be all about, oh, isn't she funny? You know, Mattie's got this, you know, she's a bit odd, you know. So I really didn't want it to be kind of laughing at her.
No.
So I think a lot of the humor is also in the other characters. For instance, there's Henry, who's a man approaching retirement who works in local government, and at the start he has his own delusions, and at the start he thinks he's going for a promotion, and he isn't. Spoiler alert, he is not, and he hasn't moved with the times. And yes, there's that, and then there's the other staff, the staff within the hospital, who don't recognize really what Mattie is telling them, even though they want to connect with her. Their assumptions about who she is and what might happen to her. And there's lots of gaps in the knowledge that there aren't good records. There are no records of what happened to her before she was admitted. So the reader gets into that. So I quite wanted, because in my first novel, it was about a woman with a secret. And so the narrator knew more than the reader, and that was gradually revealed, and, you know, a bit of a shock, surprise, or whatever, when people discover what the issue is. In this one, I wanted readers to know more than the characters. So it's as if all of the three main point of view characters. So one of the others is a social worker who works with Mattie, a young social worker new to the hospital. They each have a piece of the jigsaw, in a sense, but they can't put them together, and it's only the reader who has that overview and can see, I don't know, just kind of what's missing and what needs to happen, but the characters can't easily do that. So yeah, I'm glad you found the humor there, Fiona.
And what you kind of, the reveal of the story in this last one was very cleverly done, you know, by the alternating chapters, different points of view. And so, yeah, I enjoy. You were saying that you had a kind of slower reveal on the first one, but this one was a real page turner because of that. I think you were kind of thinking, oh, so that's just happened. And as you were reading, it was like, oh, right, I understand that now. So, but I'm sure, to me, the inspirational young social worker, her voice was very refreshing and light and positive and enthusiastic. And I can remember going for a job once, it was in local government, and I was told within the first month to stop acting so energetic by a colleague, and because it made them look, you know, lazy. And it was like, what? Yeah. It's like, no, we go at this pace. You're trying to go too quick. You'll burn out. It's like, but I'm trying to do my best. It was like, they almost said, stop doing your best because it makes us look bad. Then, you know, job's worth. But no, certainly your social worker isn't a job's worth, is she? She's really keen to kind of, you know, make up for kind of past misfortune. I'm trying not to kind of give the story away.
She is indeed very, very keen, but she has her blind spots as well.
Yeah, she's human.
Well, and I think, she's got a lot. She's got a lot to learn as well. But I was thinking about when you were talking before about your writing about your own painful experience about losing a baby, and I picked up the, you'd taken 20 years to be ready to write that. And I wondered sort of how, if that's kind of a theme that comes up in the work that you do with adult learners who sometimes come to you at a difficult point in their lives, and the question of how long do you need to leave something to be able to process it, to be able to write about it well? Because we can write, I think it's about the difference between writing for ourselves and writing for publication, and that we need that distance, don't we, if we're writing for others to read.
Yeah, I can remember trying to write some poetry early on, and I had a wonderful mentor called Gwen Grant from North Nottinghamshire, and I'd written a rant basically. So it was something that I obviously hadn't processed and dealt with fully. And she was saying, never write like that again, Fiona, because it's not nice to read. So yes, there are, and I have to respect that in working with vulnerable people, and certainly representing them and encouraging them to bear their stories, is that if it is kind of if triggering kind of huge emotional response, or a response that isn't positive, that maybe this isn't the time to be writing about that or sharing. Because often learners will bring something and we'll share it within the group, which is a closed group where everybody acknowledges that things stay in the room. And then sometimes it's not until you read something out loud that you realize what a painful kind of trigger this is. So I think sometimes it's self-discovery. I've said that I find writing cathartic in my challenges. I've come to writing during my challenges. But yeah, for the losing a baby, I had to get permissions from my family as well. I was aware that just didn't happen to me, and I think your book shows this, that locking somebody away for 50 years and depriving them of their kind of relationships with their loved ones, which often happened in the old days because people weren't kept in touch, has repercussions for entire families. And it's a delicate process, and it's one where only when they feel it's right to share should they share. I try to steer things positively, but understand there will be a ranting stage within some writing, and some crossing out, and some angry maybe. So it's a delicate process, and one of the people's voices need to be able to come out realistic. And so it would be no good me kind of trying to edit somebody who was working, a writing in patois, for example, about going home to the Caribbean. If I was, to put it in the Queen's English, that would be totally inappropriate or anything like that, and would be a wrong way for me. So I've got to come in with understanding. When I work with arts in mental health groups, I'm there with colleagues such as yourselves, a nurse, and often a specialised nurse who knows the group. And I think that's the important thing. He knows the groups, he knows their style of writing, he knows what's going to upset them or trigger them or bring up issues for them, and he can steer them in the right direction and say to me, we'll pass on this one, we'll go to the next activity or something. So I'm careful of what I try to churn up, if you like, within them, their stories, and I'm advised of which way to steer people as well. And I recognise that this guy with the long-term relationship with these people knows best, and I take advice from him. So we had within some workshops recently, we remembered a lovely poet called Jean Brinter-Breezy, who was an amazing advocate for those with mental health issues in Leicester and over in Jamaica. Unfortunately, she passed recently, and we were able to emulate her style, but quite a few of the arts and mental health service users had come across Jean and enjoyed her writing before, and she just wore her heart on her sleeve and said it how it was, and but that was a real talent. So it was writing in patois often, and so yeah, it's recognizing people's roots, it's recognizing people where they're coming from, and it's one size doesn't fit all, does it? That we've all got different voices, and they all are valuable, and we can learn so much from one another, that's for sure. So thank you for asking that. So one of the questions in the chat box was, please do keep putting your questions in, everybody. So somebody has said that Matilda Windsor is Coming Home is a very intriguing title. This is from Fran Hill. And the story sounds fascinating. It is fascinating. I encourage you, Fran, to get a copy. It's well worth it. It's one of those ones that you will miss meals over because you just, sorry, I'm at that stage. I've only got a quarter of a book to go, so be aware of that. And her question was, do you think there are particular difficulties in representing vulnerable characters in fiction? Well, we've touched on that a bit, haven't we? You didn't want to kind of make your main character seem miserable, did you?
I didn't in this particular novel, but I think just honesty is the main ingredient, even though it's fiction. I think you can tell a lot of truths in fiction, and obviously there are, as you're saying just now, Fiona, there are lots of different angles on that. But yeah, I guess there's a little bit more responsibility if you're writing about somebody who's particularly marginalised, and you shouldn't. You don't want to increase prejudice and stigma, but it's still quite early days with this novel, but I do feel that Matt is quite an ambassador for mental health issues, because common mental health problems that maybe about 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 people will have some minor, not minor, they're not minor to the person, but less severe mental health issue at any one time. But severe mental health issues, like when Matty has a diagnosis of schizophrenia, doesn't explain much about it, but that's what she was given, and they're about 1 in 100. So we might not, some people might actually not. Matty might be the closest that they get to knowingly meeting somebody with a serious mental health issue. So I do feel it is a responsibility, getting that balance right, getting it, as I say, as you said, entertaining, honest, and not stigmatizing, but not everybody will experience it the same way. But yeah, thanks for that question.
And I fortuitously, I think the arts are coming into kind of places where people with mental health issues can access a lot more, and that can be residential or drop in or whatever. I understand that certainly singing and remembering prose or poetry, for example, is being used a lot with people with Alzheimer's, things like this. So these are great resources. We've spoken about all of your books except for Underneath, Anne, and we've missed Underneath altogether. Could you give us a quick synopsis of what that one is about?
And Underneath is it's a psychological suspense novel about a man who seeks to resolve a relationship crisis in an unusual and alarming way. And I don't think how you can tell from the cover, but he lives, I can't, my fingers creeping up there. He lives in a house with a cellar, and in the blurb it says it would be a shame not to make use of the cellar, and that is set mostly in Nottingham, but also in the cellar. You might think, but yeah, I mean that's also about mental health issues, because he's thinking he's solving a problem, he's thinking he's moving forward in his life, but he's actually, that's when he starts unraveling. And because we see it, it's a first person narrator, so because we see it from his point of view, you're kind of getting inside his head. So it's the cellar of his mind, in a way.
Oh, very deep, very clever, and very daring. People have said to me before, when I've written in a gentleman's voice, that is that difficult. Did you? I would hate you to reveal who you based it upon, because he was quite a mean.
Yeah, I live with him.
I'm sure that's not right, but yeah. Again, people sometimes find it difficult for us to imagine where we've got our research from, but I can think straight away of cases in the news abroad where a similar story. So yeah, they do say, don't they, that listen to for good writers, they should be listening to conversations on buses and everywhere, and hearing things, reading kind of newspaper articles and things. So did that come from your understanding of other cases, or was it just
I was actually what sparked it was something quite different, really, I'm not sure that it comes across as successfully in the novel as I would have liked it to do, but my interest was in somebody being dependent on someone who doesn't have your best interests in mind. So even though it isn't written from the point of view of the woman who spends some time in the cellar, that was my original interest in this novel. So I was thinking about how to represent that. So that might be a theme that I come back to and try and get in from a different angle. But I suppose it is the same in the psychiatric hospital, really, about that these patients are totally reliant on the staff, and if the staff didn't like them for whatever reason, then their lives could be hell.
Controlling behavior, maybe, that you're kind of lifting the lid on that. And we know that kind of in kind of what abuse kind of settings, that is one. Control is now accepted as a case of abuse, whereas before it had to be physical or mental or something, but now controlling behavior, they've categorized, because it happens quite a lot. So I think your historical writing, because a lot of the stories go back, don't they, a while, shows lovely language that is authentic, and situations that are authentic, but also as you're reading, you're thinking, oh yes, this sounds a bit like that situation there. Or so there's that kind of you're tapped into real situations that we can. We're not happy with a lot of them, because there's been a lot of kind of abuse and things like that. But we're acknowledging that's historically what's happened, but looking forward through the humor and everything, we can see a better time. And so I think a lot of your stories are quite hopeful in that. And then they're non-judgmental, really, aren't they?
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you think that, because I mean, I think we do have our own views, and I have some very strong views on some things, but we've got to be neutral in our approach. I'm just thinking, Fiona, there is a question here to you.
Okay.
From Marilyn in the chat that you have not picked up,
right.
Which is about which do you find easiest to write, or prefer to write, prose or poetry?
Poetry, I go to, as you say, when I've got over my rant. Funnily enough, last year when I wrote something at the beginning of lockdown, it was poetry, and that I go to because it can be like a tonic in between writing longer pieces where you're researching and you're kind of trying to fit. You were talking about this 7-year project. Mine haven't taken that long, but I went off and did something for an American company publisher, and that was quite hard work. It was a lot of research, and that's out of print now. But so I came back to kind of poetry, to a bit of light relief, really. So, but I do it more for me and to collaborate. Some of my poetry was taken up by the museums in Leicester and included in various things. So somehow poetry, and also in workshops, often it's easier for somebody to emulate a poem than it is a flash or short stories, because you have, there's so much more, there's more words and more beginning, middle and end, tying things up and plot, all those kind of things in a short story. So but I think this and also this year, I say, I've had to go writing a picture book, and got together with a lovely guy who called Paul Warren, and we just self-published that, a few copies, and it was lovely to, it's about a swan family, and they're telling us, how difficult it is to fly. So it's for toddlers to kind of relate to that. There are scary things in life, and we have to have a go, and we might hurt ourselves along the way. But so yeah, but that picture book, that was kind of, there was some rhyme and rhythm and things like that in there. So that, going to writing those kind of people, things and pieces, and using different disciplines, really, of short word counts and counting syllables, things like that kind of discipline. I quite kind of enjoy practicing. I need to practice to be able to model, within my workshops, alongside the short stories. I am advocating that my learners create pieces of flash, which is less than 1,000 words. But I'm really rubbish cutting myself down. 2,000 I'm a lot happier with. But as you say, the young adult get over it. That was a lot longer, and my new adult, the one out of print, that was again longer still. And those projects are just all consuming, Anne, and you've got to have, you have months and months of being in characters' heads, and that can be really draining, actually, I find. So the prose, is more of work really, and maybe the poetry is more of play. So thank you for that. But we know that you need a mixture in life, don't you?
Yeah.
And Picasso, bless him, he's got some pots. We've got some pots from the Attenboroughs given to the Attenborough Art Centre and to the New Walk Museum in Leicester. And Picasso created these pots. He went to France. He had a friend with a kiln in France, and he used to create pots in his spare time. And we know that his first discipline was the painting, but through the pots he could, they say, don't they, that if we use different parts of our brain, it kind of reignites something. And this is what we're trying to do, aren't we? We're trying to put great words and ideas and stimulate thought. I think we're both into thought provoking, aren't we? We're both
I think Fiona, we could talk for another 3 hours, but I think our time's up.
It is.
So we need to make way for the next.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us, and as I say, I hope that we've answered all your questions, and if not, go on to our websites, and there's some free stuff with Anne, and I'm quite happy to negotiate a few prices for people if they'd like to buy a book from me, signed book. Go there and say that you've heard me here. So thanks for having us, and thank you, Anne, for being a great inspirational writer. Bye-bye, and thanks for having us.
Thank you, Fiona. Yeah,
Cheers.
thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.